Asyle, the Engineer, and the Island. Week 52, Day 1. A big storm hit this morning. Feels kind of appropriate, like everything's coming full circle now that I'm just a week away from my 1-year anniversary on this island. Though that seems too charitable a word. Before it got too much worse, I spent some time battening down the hatches in the morning, before heading underground and adjusting the electrofuge. When I was done, I decided to take some of the iron plates I'd collected over the past several days and cut them into additional generator plates, braving the weather to get to the workshop. The electrofuge is hogging most of the mechanical and electrical energy from the hydrothermal vent, but if I can build more generators around the base, it shouldn't be a hindrance. When I was done, the weather reminded me that I still wanted to get as independent from fire as possible, specifically in the realm of metalworking. Even if I had my copper plates ready for pulling wire right now, I'd still need the sun and firewood to melt it. In theory, I should be able to plate my copper into thin wires or strips directly, but I've been hesitant because the electroplating sometimes isn't smooth, resulting in a spiky surface like some kind of mineral deposit, which would be too brittle to appropriately bend. I figured this might be helped though if I could make the carbon surface I'm depositing onto very smooth as well. So I took the copper deposition plate from the electrofuge and mixed up some very fine charcoal dust and ethanol to make a good smooth ink, which I then carefully painted onto the deposition plate in a spiral pattern to minimize the number of bends there would be in the wire if/when it was finished. As I went, I thought to myself that it might be easier to control the shape of the finished wires, as well as their internal quality, if they were deposited into indentations in the plate's surface, so I mixed up a bit of clay to make some new plates with spiral grooves of varying thicknesses. I'll leave them to dry and hope that I get some clear weather tomorrow. While I was at it, I figured I might as well make a couple more mandrels for other shapes I might want to plate that could come in handy. The first that came to mind was pipes, not just for water, but for mechanical structures, as they're light, strong, and relatively flexible. Bamboo can certainly attest to the strength and versatility of that form. The trick would be finding a way to fit them together, but I might be able to use the plating surface to give them flared ends on one side so that they stick together, though I'd still have to find a way to fix them together, probably welding, because I'm not sure I could use the lathe to accurately thread bolts or screws under these conditions. I made a couple of long, straight clay cylinders of varying diameters and set them aside to dry. I figured it would be easier to remove the pipes from the outside of the form than from the inside, and a thick layer of graphite between them may expedite separation. Still, if all that fails, making them taper slightly down their entire length may help as well, not to mention making it easier to fit them all together. I stopped for lunch when I was done, making a dash back to the house and getting some snacks stored in the panic room before settling in for the rest of the day to work on my little game scroll. This time I started working on a new level, introducing and iterating on the various hazard mechanics, like pits, spike traps, enemies, specifically the Mafia goons and angry crows. In this, I found an interesting new twist on the game that made the Mafia characters feel like a legitimate threat. The angry birds were easy to take out with just one jump on the head, but the Mafia goons were harder because they were twice as tall, and double jumping with this device is hard enough as it is. Therefore, in order to pass by certain areas that they're guarding, The player first has to platform their way above the Mafia goons before dropping down on top of them, sometimes having to jump on their heads several times to get them to slide into the ground. As I messed with this, it gave me an idea for a new twist on the mechanics, namely a moving platform that the player could stand on to cross gaps. Developing each stage of a given level, in turn, informed the story that was happening in the background, which in turn helped me come up with more mechanics. Another I came up with was dialogue boxes, where walking past certain static characters will slide a little door in the background, revealing a sentence or two meant to represent whatever they're saying. In this case, it's mostly about how the Mafia barged in and took over the level. As I was working on this, I noticed how the raging storm outside wasn't bothering me as much as it used to. I know it's a problem, and a problem I'm definitely going to have to deal with later, but it's not a problem that can be fixed or mitigated by worrying about it right now. Best to continue keeping myself busy with something interesting and pleasant. I was more or less finished with the level at the end of the day, having brightened everything up with some of my watercolor paints, and although the storm was still pretty intense, I got ready for bed and tried to ignore it. The noise, though, drove me to sleep in the underwater dome tonight. Week 52, Day 2. The rain was gone by morning, so after I got up and made my adjustments to the electrofuge, I started cooking my new wire and pipe electrodeposition surfaces in the solar kiln before assessing the damage. As usual, the solar array and wind turbine got the worst of it, and while the breakaway lines on the turbine helped protect it, the solar reflectors were starting to look a little worse for wear, not least of which because I haven't really had a proper maintenance day in the past couple of months. For now, all I could really do were quick fixes to reinforce the panels with cord and to prepare a few more replacement reflector panels. While I was at it, I made sure there were plenty of replacement panels for the roof of the kitchen, as several of the stellar radiator panels had become cracked by debris in the high winds as well, though they haven't been exposed to nearly as much damage as those on top of the solar tower. When all of that was taken care of, I remembered my routine and went foraging. Plenty of fallen branches on the ground for wood. When I was done, I came back and had lunch. The water in the food synthesis machine had started becoming sweet, so I poured some into one of my empty soda bottles and set it to start carbonating while I was making lunch. I'm pleased that I should have an unlimited supply of soda now. The yeast, on the other hand, hadn't fully grown in yet, and besides that, there was still a slightly bitter taste to it, suggesting that the ammonia levels were a little too high, so I adjusted the valve. After lunch, I removed the pots from the kiln and remembered that I had some music box parts that I needed to case harden, so I packed the parts in charcoal and left them to cook for an hour or two. In the meantime, I got back to making my game scrolls and decided to start playing with a new mechanic. I couldn't give AHiT a proper hook shot with the mechanisms I had in place, but I did have the idea to make a little piece of paper that worked like a pendulum that the character sprite could hook onto, so it was a little more like swinging on a vine. Of course, the sprite couldn't actually swing. How far they go as they swing depends on the player scrolling the swing back and forth, pressing the jump button when they want to get off. This is useful for crossing gaps too wide to jump, and I played with tricky platforming sections where the player had to swing between multiple swings in sequence. This struck me as the most appropriate mechanic to play with for the Alpine Skyline level of the original game, so that's how I stylized the assets of that level, though it was kind of a jump ahead in the sequence of the original levels. That's fine though, since I can play the levels in any order I want anyway. When the music box parts were case hardened and cooled, I worked on installing them in the little game console, though I had to adjust the length of the tines a bit first, as case hardening the iron had changed their springiness and therefore their pitch. Once that was done, I installed the roller and wind-up mechanisms and started experimenting with the soundtracks for each level. I found that my original plan for covering up the roller where I didn't want music played wasn't going to work, as it kind of muted and muddled the music. Instead, I had to fall back on the way I built the music machine, sewing little knots into a strip of fabric, which was much stronger than paper anyway, and letting the knots pluck the tines. This'll wear down the knots over time, however, so it'll likely need regular maintenance. Still, at the end of the day, I got it playing that happy, adventurous little tune I've always been so fond of, and it reminds me of something. Something familiar. Something I miss, but something I never had. Week 52, Day 3. The rain's back, but I'm glad I was able to get done what I did yesterday. I adjusted the electrofuge in the morning, and the copper electrofuge seemed pretty much fully calibrated, so I installed my wire plates. We'll see how this turns out. In the meantime, since the weather wasn't so bad that it would stop me from getting between the buildings, I decided to catch up on some paper making, as I've been using quite a bit to make my game scrolls and books, and I wanted to have plenty for other projects. There was plenty of vegetation strewn about from the storm the other day, so I had no shortage of materials. I soon set to work grinding, pressing, and spinning for most of the day. In between loads, I spent a little time doing maintenance on the machines in the workshop, in particular the loom and the drill press. The lathe hadn't seen a lot of action recently, and the crusher shouldn't see much action in the future. I stopped for lunch and checked on the food synthesizer. The yeast did seem to be growing in better today, and I gave it a try. It kind of tasted like the nacho cheese you get out of the pump at the convenience store, which I always found kind of disgusting. However, it did end up cooking into lacy, savory flakes, which reminded me a little bit of Cheez-Its, though more bready in flavor than cheesy. With the addition of a little salt and the slight acidity I bred them for, they almost taste like mozzarella. Whatever the case, I'm thankful for the new flavors to diversify my diet, because there's only so much banana, taro, and sweet potato a man can eat. I got back to paper making after lunch, and with a good deal of the machine maintenance done, I did a little more work on my game scrolls between loads of cellulose, mostly expanding a bit more on the mechanics of the Alpine skyline. The addition of the zip lines gave me ideas for other kinds of moving platforms that would make a good basis for new levels, particularly for the levels from Battle of the Birds. With a whole lot of paper made at the end of the day, for whatever creative projects crossed my mind in the future, I set the loom running for the night and tidied up before bed. Week 52, Day 4. The rain was back, like it didn't want me to forget how I got here. I don't really appreciate it. At least it gave me an excuse to continue working on indoor projects. I checked on the electrofuge in the morning, and owing to the higher concentrations of copper in the solution, from recycling it over the past several days to get the coil adjustments just right, the wire plates were done. As I anticipated, the wire deposited in ribbons on a flat surface didn't turn out that well. The crystals must have been all uneven inside, which made the wire brittle. The wires deposited in grooves, however, did better, because the copper crystals filled up the centers of the grooves, making the wire uniform throughout its thickness, except at the edges where there was a little flashing from excess copper deposition. Easy enough to scrape off and recycle. I'll start plating more of the finer wire, so I can build another generator coil to boost power production, and in the meantime, I chiseled out a few more iron plates for the core and stator, along with making a few more deposition plates for the finer wires, as I didn't expect I would need to make thick ones nearly as often as thin ones. With that done, I got back to work on my game scrolls, starting by making a couple more music reels for the scrolls I already had, and the ones I planned on making. It was easy to lose myself in this, because the music from AHiT Time is one of the best parts of it, and I remember them all vividly. Before I knew it, it was time for lunch. I supplemented my food with what was produced by the food synthesizer again, but it was hardly enough to make me completely self-sufficient. While that wasn't entirely its purpose, at least not here, I still like the idea, especially for the underwater dome, so I'll need to keep in mind the need to make the next version much bigger, or to at least give it a bigger surface area somehow. After lunch, I started working on a new level for my game scrolls, specifically the train rush level, and I experimented with some new mechanics again. This time, I connected the scroll directly to the music reel, so that the level moved along at the same pace as the music, forcing the player to keep moving as the train cars slowly blew up. I soon found, however, that this didn't entirely work. Firstly, it got really annoying for the music to reset to the beginning every time the player died, and there was a lot of dying in this level, so instead, I kept the background and music reels separate, but put some resistance between them so that the level wanted to drag on whether the user was providing input or not. Secondly, it just made movement in anything but the vertical direction very difficult, because there wasn't a lot of left-right wiggle room. I could still make going back not an option, however, by giving the backgrounds a sort of gill-shaped layer underneath that slid out from under them, showing the train car exploding and pushing the player off in the process. This could be triggered by the music reel, which helped keep things moving along in pace with the frenetic music. My favorite part was at the end, though, when the player gets to the engine, revealing the conductor and his cameras filming. I made him say, "Cut! Not bad, lass, but could we do it again with a wee bit more feeling?" I was chuckling to myself the whole time I was making it. And again, as I went, the sliding backgrounds gave me ideas for new mechanics for the next series of levels, but I'm out of time for today. Week 52, Day 5. It was a clear day today. The weather can't seem to make up its mind this week. I checked on the electrofuge this morning, as usual, and made adjustments to some of the rarer metals that have begun to plate. One of them that I started to see signs of deposition on, finally, was aluminum, which is actually almost as common as iron in the Earth's crust. However, aluminum is usually bound up in minerals as aluminum oxide, an extremely hard ceramic normally used in sandpaper, as well as being the main constituent of rubies. I suspect, though, that the combination of heat, pressure, and sulfuric acid deep underground has helped break it down into aluminum sulfide, allowing it to be electroplated, albeit at a slower rate than some of my other metals. This is great news for me because aluminum is lightweight, nearly as strong as iron, and chemically non-reactive, so I could use it for all sorts of structural applications, or as a better reflective surface for my various mirrors. I'll have to wait until I've got a bit more, however, and have finished calibrating its section of the electrofuge, which should take at least another week. After that, I installed the replacement reflectors on the solar kiln and stellar radiator, and got the additional wire plates cooking before doing my morning forage. When I got back, I took the wire I'd produced so far and began building a new generator module. There wasn't really any point to installing it on the hydrothermal turbine, as it really couldn't generate any more additional torque, in spite of my attempts to minimize rotational resistance on the electrofuge rotors. Most of its spare power was going into running the coils and electrolysis plates, with little left over to run the lights and stoves. However, now I have enough metal to build as many generators as I want, so I installed this one in the workshop where it could add nearly continuous additional power to the grid. I needed to adjust the electrofuge when I did this though, as it suddenly gained a bit more voltage than usual, which threw off its delicate electrical balance. After lunch, I decided to build another electrolytic transistor module to keep the voltage in the electrofuge constant from now on, so I don't have to keep adjusting it every time I want to add power to the grid. Simply by adding a little resistor to the gate and wiring it up to the wrong side, I could basically tell it to increase its resistance the higher the gate voltage was, so that the power flowing through it would always stay the same. I spent the rest of the afternoon working on a new game scroll with those new shifting background mechanics. It was really perfect for the Dweller's Mask mechanic from the Subcon Forest level of AHiT Time, but because I couldn't really give the sprite a mask or add another button to the game console, I instead had the idea to make the background change by pressing a button in the level. Instead of passing a character revealing dialogue, passing a little bell would cause platforms to phase into the environment, and cause others to phase out, hence the puzzles. And there was a lot of room for options on that front, so I didn't finish before the end of the day. One of the tricks I thought was particularly clever, though, was getting enemies on an isolated platform to chase or run away from the player to phase the platforms in and out. While I was working on this, I noticed that I was having an easier time staying fixated on this project than on my last writing project, and I think that's because making these scrolls, even though they're made of paper, is still heavily mechanical, and that's a more interesting challenge for my brain. Week 52, Day 6. It was a bit cloudy today, but it didn't look like it was going to rain. So after I was done adjusting the electrofuge in the morning, again focusing mostly on the aluminum, I did my morning forage. When I was done, I tried to think of other things I might be able to do with the good weather, but of all the things that really needed to be done, I couldn't really think of anything I could do or start right away that would actually be helpful. I was thinking in particular about the wooden pipes for the geothermal well. They're going to dissolve from the sulfuric acid eventually, but I can't really replace them with something like iron pipes either, or any metal for that matter. I doubt I could make more than a meter's worth of pipe per day at my current rate, maybe 2, which would still take thousands of days, that is, several years, to make enough to reach the bottom of the well, and even if I could, the sulfuric acid would just dissolve the metal pipes eventually. I suppose I could try clay, and it wouldn't hurt to get started. Using bamboo as a form to build them around, I could probably make them a meter long and about 1 square inch in area. That means I could cook about 1,000 of them at once. Probably less, but even so, it shouldn't take me too long to make enough pipes to reach all the way down there this way. I'm still concerned about the pipes breaking under their own weight, though, even if I can make some kind of bearing to keep them separated from the twisting motion of the electrofuge rotors. So I took a moment to do some stress tests on the clay which had a compressive strength of about 16 megapascals and a density of about 2 grams per cubic centimeter. Factoring in gravity, that means I could make the clay pipes 815 meters tall before they'd collapse under their own weight, which isn't long enough, but it did give me an idea. They don't have to bear each other's weight if the walls of the shaft can do it for them. All I have to do is make some ridges on the sides of the pipes to grab onto the walls of the shaft while still letting water pass around them. The trick will be getting them to grab onto the walls while still making them narrow enough to fit down the hole. This may be accomplished better by a spacer for pipes to rest on at different levels, which can be lowered into the tube sideways and rotated to wedge itself into place. Though I might need to make them with a little rubber or something, so that they have some give and don't shatter at the bottom of the shaft where I can't clear them out. Another option to consider is active support. The steam rising up the return pipes may drag on them a little, perhaps using a series of baffles, pushing them up against gravity, so they don't have to support their own weight as much, though this would take a little energy away from the turbine. One final thing I think I need to keep in mind is a means of retrieving these pipes or their fragments if something goes wrong. I don't have this problem with the bamboo pipes because they're wood, and I can just flood the hole and float them out. Though I may be able to use water pressure from the steam to flush fragments out if it becomes necessary. It would be easier though if I could make the clay buoyant enough to float, which would require filling it with air pockets, like pumice, but without compromising its structural integrity. I could do this perhaps by building sealed cavities into the pipes instead, decreasing their cross-sectional area for water to flow down through, but that shouldn't affect steam production too badly. If I wanted the pipes to be neutrally buoyant, a little over half of their volume would need to be air. Not sure if I can do that, but I can give it a try, though it'll take at least twice as long to make the pipes that size. Finally, if the pipes do shatter and fall to the bottom of the shaft, they may subduct into the magma anyway and stop being a problem, though the electrofuge and geothermal generator would be out of commission until then. Might almost be easier to build a second shaft next to the first for the water to flow through, though I don't really have any means of connecting them. It's not a perfect plan, and I'm not entirely pleased with it, but I think it's the best I can do under the current circumstances. I got some narrow sticks and coated them evenly with clay, tying some onto a jig for spacers. Once I'd gotten the hang of it, I could crank out one pipe every 10 seconds or so I had most of the pipes done by lunchtime. Hopefully it'll be sunny tomorrow so I can cook them. After lunch, I took a break and got back to making my little game scrolls, finishing off the subcon forest level and making a creepy music track for it, along with background characters and dialogue. I know he's a fan favorite, but I've always hated Snatcher for basically mugging a little girl for her soul, so I made an extra scroll and music reel just for the boss battle with him. And because Your Contract Has Expired is just a rockin' piece of soundtrack. However, I didn't have time to finish it before the end of the day. I'll have plenty of time tomorrow, though. Week 52, Day 7. The rain started picking up early in the morning, so I got up to batten down the hatches before trying to go back to sleep. Eventually, I got up again and calibrated the electrofuge before getting breakfast and finishing off the boss battle scroll I started yesterday. Instead of throwing a blue vial at Snatcher, though, I got the idea to turn him corporeal with the bells, which the player has to platform up to before hitting Snatcher, and after a certain amount of time, Snatcher will ring the bell again to make himself incorporeal again. during which he makes traps and enemies appear on the scroll. This one was certainly more complicated, and because it's a boss battle, which could be ongoing and doesn't need a lot of space to move around it, I made this scroll loop back on itself so it could run continuously. Felt good though to finally shove the jerk back into the ground where he belongs. I even managed to add a few more elements to the music box that gave it a little percussion. When that was done, I transcribed my Bible recordings and listened to the sermon, though the storm made it staticky and difficult to hear. I didn't get too much out of it. When I was done, I headed down to the dome and fed the sharks before having lunch. I again enjoyed the muffled sound of the rain on the water above. I found myself just sitting and looking out into the deep, thinking about how far I've come. Thinking about how crazy it was for me to be sitting where I was at all. I built a submersible glass dome out of dirt and sticks. Of course, that sort of thing has never really been impressive to me, because I've always seen things for, how do I put this, what they are rather than what they do, or what they appear to be, if that makes any sense. What they're made of and what they can do if they're in the right shapes. A sandy beach and a glass dome have always been mostly the same thing to me. I don't really know how to think any other way now. And yet I still remember how alien it made me feel every time I was forced to recognize that most of the people I met didn't see things that way. See things for what they normally are rather than for what they actually are. And knowing how neural networks work, I can hardly blame them. I have to be honest, I haven't felt that way for a long time. At least, not so much since I got here. And even then, only when I've thought about other people, or going back. The loneliness, it still burns, but not too much worse here than there. I've never really belonged anywhere, except maybe with my immediate family, but even that's kind of dissolved since Dad died. Even in a crowded room, it just made it easier to pretend, but I knew they didn't get me, and I didn't really get them either. Never really felt comfortable interacting as much as helping. Maybe it's better this way. I took a deep breath and tried to leave these thoughts on the back burner. I returned to my office and started working on another little game scroll, this time just a short, easy one, picture perfect. It's basically a bunch of simple platforms in a cityscape where you have to stop to have your picture taken by random penguins as you try to make your way to the stage on time. Not everything needs to be that complicated or explore new mechanics. Sometimes it's okay to just have some fun, and I remember this being one of the levels that really got me hooked on AHiT Time. I've always kind of balked at the idea of being famous or popular, and while I still don't consider it valuable, I kind of wanted to be able to at least help give that kind of attention to HatKid. Maybe because I didn't have much myself. Could have also been the music. I had that one more or less finished by the end of the day, and the happy little tune was still going in my head when I went to bed.
It's the final blooper.
A big storm hit this morning, somewhat reminiscent, off to a good start. But I've been hesitant, whatever that means. The water in the food synthesis machine. The water in the food synthesis, because there's only so much banana, taro, and sweet potato a man can eat. You had me at roast beef. particularly I supplemented my food with I supplemented my food. Poof. This time I connect the scroll. Okay, typo. And now I'm going to sing my AHiT Fan-Lyrics because this is the last week of the series and it's my show. I can do what I want. Tick tock, tick tock, what's our next stop? Tick tock, can I get off? Tick tock, excuse me, can't stop. Sorry, can't talk, gotta stop that bomb from going off. Get going, little feet, let's not make this our swan song. Speed running to the beat of this frickin' ticking time bomb. Get going, little feet, let's not make this our swan song. Speed running to the beat of this frickin' ticking time bomb. Tick tock, can't stop, won't stop. Tick tock, someone stop this ticking clock. Tick tock, watch that big drop. Yikes, a buzzsaw, gotta stop that bomb from going off. I gotta jump, jive, and dash, dive, and climb the walls to stay alive, 'cause there's buzzsaws and pitfalls. Wanna chop me up, why? Just because. One of them that I started to see finds of. This music's pretty groovy, but no time to jive. Hey, if I survive, do you think they'll make a movie? I suppose I could try Clay, and it wouldn't hurt to get started. Hold on, I need to stop and change this. This is gonna take a while. I gotta swing my groove thing before this choo-choo goes kabang. Okay, so it turns out I can't fix that. I'm just gonna have to go with what I wrote down. Darn it. Sing, song, ding, dime, make up your own rhyme. This is not fine, 'cause I'm all out of time. Which can be lowered into. I got some narrowed. Feely good though to finally shove the jerk back into the ground where he belongs. Typo. And that sounds like as good a segue as any to get back into the musical section of your regularly scheduled program. Apologize to Man on the Internet for borrowing some of his lyrics.
Run along my forest trail, doomed to fail. Fell into my hidey hole. Sell your soul. Some advice, don't think twice. Should have known I wasn't nice. 'Cause when you signed that dotted line, you should have thought it through. Contracts ended, ta-ta, you're dead, got no more use for you. No, I can't give up. No, I won't give up. Your attacks might beat me up and my own feet might trip me up, I won't stay down. I have to get back up, the stakes are high and I've come so far. If I jump a little higher, I can reach the stars. You better give up, you can't win. I'll never give up, I can win. You better give up, you're toast. I'll never give up the ghost. Why don't you just die and make peace? I'm not leaving without that timepiece. I won't hold back. I have your hat. Give it back. All the rules that you made up to keep my heart from lifting up won't hold me down. 'Cause I never give up. There's no pit too deep and no mountain too tall. I won't stop till I find them all. You better give it up, you can't win. Never give it up, I can win. Better give it up, you're too small. Bigger box is hard to fall. You're 1 hit away from dying. That's all I need to keep on trying. Better give it, never give it, better give it, never give it, better give it, never give it, better give it, better give it up.
Did you just color me blue with my own attack? This can't count, right? Surely this doesn't count. Okay, that's it, kid. Time to die!
Up till now, I've just been toying with you, but the gloves come off, now you're through. It was all fun and games till you crossed the line. Now I'll pull all the stops out to take back what's mine. Out of the frying pan into the fire. I'm getting tired, but I won't expire. I'll use your attacks to lift me higher. I can feel my hopes still holding on and growing with each minute that I stay alive and dodge your moves. I think this time I'll win it. Every trap you can think up and every tile that you blow up can't slow me down, 'cause I never give up. There's no pit too deep and no mountain too tall. I won't stop till I get them all. You better give it up, you can't win. Never give it up, I can win, 'cause now that I know all your moves, you're not as difficult as CJ Grooves. Better give it up, there's no hope. Said somebody who's on the ropes. Better give it, never give it, better give it, never give it, better give it, never give it, better give it. Every clause you can think up and every contract you write up can't stop me now, 'cause I never give up. There's no pit too deep and no mountain too tall. I won't stop till I get them all.
Hey there. Thanks for listening all the way to the end of my gratuitous fan lyrics, and to the end of this project. I hope your year has, in some ways, not been as eventful as mine, though hopefully no less productive or character building. While this is the last official week of the series, I've got one more short episode coming up on New Year's Eve to look back on what I've made here and to set the stage for where I'd like to go in the future. This has been a story about a man learning how to be alone. Now I'd like to learn how to be together. If you'd like to help me with that, please share this story with someone who you think would enjoy it. Someone who has similar values and interests as me, who this story may hopefully make feel a little less alone. And if you want, pressing all the YouTube buttons will tell the algorithm to do a little bit of that sharing for you. If you'd like to chat about what you've been up to this year, highlights, challenges, or even what you'd build on your personal island, feel free to share them in the comments below, or email me using the address in the channel description. All of that finally having been said, thank you so much for listening, and hope to see you here again next week.